Welcome to RPG Ramblings with Jeff Jones. This is a weekly show exploring the various details of the tabletop RPG hobby through discussions with interesting people. This week, Tim Shorts of Gothridge Manor joins me to discuss a wonderful article written by Andrew Peregrine for the Modiphius blog. The article is entitled Dune number 10, Walking Without Rhythm, and it was intended to explain to the GM how there's so much going on in Arrakis that there is no need for planet hopping in the Dune RPG. After reading 6 points, I realized that these points are good for any campaign the GM wants to run. Furthermore, I think that if a campaign feels stale, it is likely that adding these elements to varying degrees might be all that you need to inspire the players and yourself. Hang on tight, people. We cover a lot of ground. It is time to get rambling. Hello, Tim.
What's going on, Jeff?
Well, I think we're going to talk about using Dune to add spice to your game.
Nice play on words.
I didn't have to work too hard to come up with
I was going to say, yeah, you didn't have to go too deep for that one.
So there was an article that was written. It's for man's name is Andrew Peregrine, who wrote an article called, for those of you at home, called Dune number 10 - Walking Without Rhythm. I'll put the link in the show notes. But he gives different points of utilizing Dune as far as, like, you know, how to make Dune an exciting place, or what makes Dune an exciting place. Mm-hmm. And then I was just reading that. I was thinking, I think those points that are given are all applicable to really any game, but not just Dune. I think Dune amplifies certain aspects, but I guess for those that don't know, Tim, can you give like a quick synopsis of Dune?
Dune, let's see. You got your spice, which basically controls the universe, that it allows people to what is it? They get to travel through space without.
Yeah, so it's a science fiction setting where there's no computers because robots took over the world, and so the use of drugs, of ingesting drugs, right, a special drug, can allow you to be a computer, or to certain people who's been genetically developed to travel through space.
Right. I think it turns them kind of alienish anyways, too.
Yeah, like a fish. Yeah.
And then you've got your typical anytime there's a powerful resource, everybody wants a piece of it, and they kind of use like the old noble houses. You've got barons in it, and they're always battling for power over spice, and it's really interesting because they got what's the religion that they have in there?
The Bene Gesserits.
And then there's they're the one, they're all female, correct? I think in the book, and they have special powers that they can kind of influence people, and then they're very prophecy based too.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a Messiah coming. And right, the whole idea is that they had such control over their bodies, they could determine the sexes of their babies. And so there's a whole breeding program that went on with the different houses.
That's right, yeah.
Up until Jessica, who was in love with the Duke, chose to shortchange if she was supposed to have a daughter,
right, and
chose to have a boy instead.
Yes. Yeah, it's been a long time since I read the book, but yeah. And then they have a lot of intricacies in there. I think Dune is one of those books that's a 300-page novel, but it's so much more. I mean, Herbert was able to fit so many details and nuances into those 300 pages that you're dealing with a planet and politics, and you don't get lost in any of it because all of it makes sense and fits together.
Right. And the thing is, you really kind of need to read it twice because I don't think it doesn't slow down for you, but I don't think it's there's a lot of information, but it's not presented in a bad way, but it's still a little bit overwhelming.
Well, you need to learn their terms, their lingo too, because there's a lot of words that are made up for the setting that you have to get accustomed to when you're reading it. and that because there's different terms for different things. And when the book goes along as if you already know it.
Right.
And you definitely it helps to have a little Dune glossary.
Yeah, I think they might have had like these in the back of the book.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think so too.
So the spice, which is really the most important commodity in all the universe, only exists on Dune, which is a desert planet, and only can be extracted in the desert parts, which are inhabited by the sandworms, which are really large, and they're the finding the source of it. And so there's a lot of political intrigue. It's a hazardous planet. There's a group of Fremen who are separatists, so to speak, living out in the desert. And so there's a lot going on. And so, as we kind of go through that, it's like with these points here, I'll just say the main points given in this article, but wilderness survival, urban survival, political intrigue. It's called Canley, but it's basically assassination. That's part of the society that's legalized, mysticism, and also the unknown. So you may say, I was thinking like a lot of these things, it's like, you know what? These exist pretty much like, we'll just say a fantasy setting or whatever. Those say, well, all these elements kind of exist, but I don't think they necessarily really do. And maybe we can kind of go through that. So the first one is wilderness survival. So it says Arrakis is dangerous, not for its politics, but lethal inhabitants and giant worms. It is dangerous just to walk around. I think normally for most of the adventures that we have, I think that's probably one that most closely fits in that the wilderness is a dangerous place, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I think for like before we start this too, I think what he did well with this article is he focused it, because if you try to do a overall spanning of a world, you get lost in too many details and you just get stretched out.
Right.
And this one's focused, and I think that's one of the, like, before you start doing anything, I think that's probably the first step you need to take before you can even take these other steps, because you'll be able to explore the nuances of the area that you're exploring. Because there's some campaigns I've had where it ran for 3 years and pretty much didn't go out of a 50-mile area, and they never knew that. Like, my players always thought it was this expansive world, but when I showed them I showed them the map of my world, and I showed them what they explored, and they were shocked at how small it was. It was because I was able to focus those details in that smaller area.
I think one thing too is it seems like with most settings that the danger is in the wilderness.
Yeah.
But it's, I think, a lot of times easy to avoid. Like, if you don't go into these woods, as long as you stay along these roads, or as long as you don't, whatever, I don't think we normally see a situation where just being outside of a city is in itself a dangerous proposition.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your setting. Because I know, like, in my Comoro Forest, there isn't a lot of, because like there's a lot of points of light setting these days. If you know that term, then Jeff, about just having civilized points,
right.
Just here and there, and so you're almost forced to go out and explore, because there really isn't any safe spot except for those, like, points of light, so to speak. And that's kind of how I run mine. But if you're running like an established campaign, yeah, roads are pretty safe for the most part, but then you can always take what's safe and corrupt it a little bit. Yeah, the roads are patrolled, but who says the guards aren't corrupt? And hey, you got to pay a toll because we got to get paid too. And so basically you're getting hustled by the
right.
the guards, and who knows, maybe they've pissed off enough people. You got bandits, but in general, yeah, at least in the wilderness, as long as you're not going up against some alpha predator kind of thing, you can usually bribe someone, or convince someone, or avoid them, because you see them coming and you're able to, like, go hide behind a log or whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to have the wilderness be like ultra dangerous, but if you're wanting to crank things up to the next level, any part outside in the desert in Arrakis is dangerous.
Yeah, especially Arrakis. Yeah, because there is no points of light there. It's just a big old desert, and the only, I guess, thing is that what's the folks that live in there?
The Freeman or Fremen.
Yeah, Fremen are hostile to people to begin with too.
Yeah.
So you've got your natural predators, and then you got those who are, trying to protect their planet or their spice or whatnot.
And you also just have the desert itself is a danger.
Right. Yeah. Just not having the resources to survive out there.
That's kind of thing. Like in a lot of games, it's like you go to town,
mm-hmm.
and it's like, maybe everything's expensive, and the ranger's like, our people say, you know what, I'm just going to sleep outdoors.
Right. Yeah. I want to go
Arrakis,
sleep in the trees.
You are going into town. There's no like, I'll just hang out. I think in some ways we do have a little bit of danger, but I don't know that we a lot of times really crank up the danger. We have the random encounter tables,
right?
And roll for random encounters, and we probably even a lot of times, as far as with games go, a lot of times we try and keep it somewhat, reasonable to the level of the party. But like, why not go to like a Jurassic Park level where it's like, no, it's you can go out and do stuff, but it is very dangerous, and you can't just. It's not that you can't move along there, but you just have to be very careful about what you do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, have you ever run a campaign in a desert setting before?
No,
I haven't either. I've never done that. I mean, my equivalent. I think primarily because where I live, I always go to the forest,
right?
But that's the way the one that I usually run is as soon as you leave the civilized area, which gets attacked often too from creatures outside, because it's not even that safe, because once in a while there are like bands of goblins or some giant creature that just comes out of the forest randomly and kind of Godzilla's the place or whatever and moves on. But anytime you leave there, even the plant life can harm you in the forest. I have a lot of different types of things. The one thing though, like the desert, like if you go in the forest, there's a lot of resources there that a human needs to live.
Right.
Where in the desert, there are none of those usually,
right.
or they're very scarce and difficult to find. And
right, because if you're ornithopter, your flying vehicle, you drop down somewhere, and all of a sudden a sandworm eats that.
Right.
Like, what are you going to do now?
Yeah, because like if a purple worm eats your horse in the forest, at least you can probably walk home, or at least get out of there, because you can find a stream and you can probably forage some food or shoot a deer on the way there. If you do that in Dune, you're just walking with a lot of sand, and hopefully when they die, they can find your body. And
yes,
yeah.
And I was also thinking, there's some settings that maybe would have like extraordinary maybe threats at night, or something like that. And I think, maybe the situation is things are safe during a certain portion.
Right.
Then the tension comes, well, what if you're not into a certain safe spot by that certain time?
Yeah. It goes back, because when you say that, the first thing I think of is the whole I Am Legend thing by Richard Matheson, where, all the zombies or vampires or whatever they're supposed to be, as soon as night hits, the place they swarm everywhere or whatever. Yeah. And if you are not in your safe spot, you're going to be hurt, and you're going to, your chances of survival just decreased a tremendous amount. Yeah.
Well, then that becomes an adventure in itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love the time elements in adventures and campaigns, like having that. It's like, you're out adventuring. Well, the sun's starting to drop behind the thing, and it's like behind the horizon, and it just makes the player start reacting quicker, or start shooting out. It just makes them panic a little bit, which I love to cause in my players.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think, there are some, and again, this is not for all, but I mean, I think some campaigns are specifically set up that, that there's incremental danger and that the assumption is near the civilization, things are safer. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But again, I think if you want to crank up the threat on the outside.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
second one is urban survival.
Aha. This is one of my favorites.
So
I do like this one.
this is the one I think we not you, but I mean in general, I think it fails the most. It says while the desert is deadly, the towns aren't too friendly either. So Arrakis has its own rules, and they're led by the need for water. So, I, to me, we kind of go into. It seems like cities are kind of that spot where everybody just relaxes, and while you may be paying a little bit more for this, a little more for that, I think it's often it's it really isn't necessarily that dangerous of a place. It's kind of a means for you to go and spend your money, or characters spend their money.
Yeah, I've run entire campaigns where they never left the like city state's wall. City state of Invincible Lord is one of those ones where I can run a whole campaign and the players never have to leave the walls. Strangely enough, in a lot of ways, I think in a way, I think towns and cities are just as dangerous. It's just harder to tell who the monsters are.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of people have trouble running it because there's so many options. Like when you're going out with a dungeon or even a wilderness adventure, you're pretty much kind of streamlined to the location. You're not going to have a lot of NPCs. You can go any direction you want, but it's the destination that they want to reach. So you can focus your efforts on that. And an urban game, forget about it. You got hundreds of NPCs roaming around city, buildings here and there, trying to account for all because having a party in the city is like having popcorn on ice because they all go in different directions and you don't know which way they're going to go.
right.
And then so you have to try to cover for that. But I think there's a rich opportunity to really develop a role playing and intrigue between groups and individuals, and take all that, some of the other stuff we're going to touch on here, the different factions in the same group. I mean, say you're in a mages guild, but there might be factions within that mages guild, and you're going to have allies in there. And there's going to be some people that don't like you, and even though they might not act on you now, right, just when you think are going to get some help, the wrong guy from the guild shows up or something like that. And like right now, I've been running a campaign with Joe the lawyer, where it's just me and him. And we're luckily both we like detail stuff, and we're kind of exploring some things. But he's basically a tinker digger guy. He's in the diggers guild. He digs ditches and he cleans out the sewers. But I use that as an opportunity to get him into the little opportunities to get him and stuff. But his class is thief, and so he's just kind of developed these relationships within the city, and some of them are just very simple, humble relationships, like with the lady downstairs with the kids. But then he's got some relationships that aren't going so well, where he inadvertently insulted a mage. So now, just those little things that you can play on, even though the mage is not going to be like an ogre and just beat him in the head or zap him with magic missiles till he's dead. Somewhere along the way, that may come into play, and it doesn't have to be a life and death situation like all the time in a dungeon. It just can be, whether it's economical or whether it's reputation wise. There's a lot of different options with urban survival, and I think unfortunately that's the one that most people avoid or just have the most trouble with.
To me, as I've been pondering on this, I think this is an area that I have failed looking back, and why towns are the most uninteresting is because I think I'm looking at it as still through the lens of a white dude living in a small town in the Midwest.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Whether or not, whether this view is correct or not, but the police are my friends. The city government, maybe there's some little bit of corruption here or there in America, but we acknowledge there's a little bit. Maybe there's some corruption here and there. But I don't fear the police. I don't. If I want to leave town, I can leave town. There's nobody stopping me. I'm not facing any sort of economic threat. I'm not feeling the shakedowns of anything. And I think we kind of take our experiences and, like I've known people who lived in India or from India, and their corruption's terrible there. Absolutely, terrible. Or if you were to live in, pre, like Iraq during Saddam, you had those three people groups. It's just it was a powder keg. All these groups just vying for power and terrible things happening in the background, and the police just being utterly brutal. And I don't think we look at the government through that lens. And if we did, I think it could make for, it's terrible in reality, but it's more interesting in fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So if your government comes and let's say they're being obnoxious to your players, whether it's you're playing D&D or Traveler, what are the players going to do?
Well, that's the toughest one, because you got to have players that are not going to just start like, well, if the guard tells me to go jump, they have to pay a fine or something, they'll just attack them. There's got to be sort of that trust there, and because you don't want players that just get pissed off.
Right, but as far as the characters go, if things get hot in a town, what do? You leave.
Sometimes if there's an option to leave,
but in general, that's what happens, like in D&D, or let's say Traveler, you got a spaceship.
Well, yeah, but if you think about D&D, there's not that many towns, and if you leave this town, where are you going to buy your next healing potion? Because the villages don't have any, or the hamlets.
But you still can leave town.
Oh yeah, you can, but you're leaving a huge resource then too.
And for some cities, some places, I think it is bad, but it can also. But I'm just saying, in general, if things are going bad for me right now, I can leave. There's nothing stopping me. But if you're in a spot where in Arrakis, where are you going to go? If you are getting a beat down in one of the major cities, where do you go?
Right.
You have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's happened is a lot of times characters have a lot of choices of just leaving because they're very, their characters are powerful and autonomous.
Right. Yeah. And the way we run the games, a lot of times we almost run each village, each city as an autonomous things in the beginning. So it's almost like whatever happened in this city doesn't carry over to this village. And it makes sense because there wasn't a lot of, probably information being traded, those things. But you could still have something where, like, if like the players, maybe they do something to one of the villages, maybe somehow the information gets around that these characters are not, or these players are not to be trusted. And then all of a sudden, when they go to the next village, they're kind of treated with a cold shoulder, or
but I'm talking about like applying threat, not just consequences for bad actions. I mean, like, you're going to go to jail. And if you're not going to go to jail, they're going to beat you. Then you're going to go to jail, and that's going to happen every week. Right. But you got to figure out how to get out of this cycle.
Right.
And I don't think we fully utilize, that sort of constraint in our games.
I think that would be a hard sell, though, too.
It would be for a lot of D&D people.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think, because especially if you're talking about D&D, it's definitely a heroic game. With Harn, like if somebody was playing the Harn system, I could see that because it's kind of already built in there.
You could still have the heroicism, but the idea is one of your enemies is the state, or is the police force, or is maybe a certain guild, and they will make your life. Now, you may have the ability to change things, but you don't have the freedom to leave. You don't have the freedom to say, "Wait a minute, what about my rights?"
Right.
There's
Yeah.
no like appealing. And I'm not saying that it's used to grind down characters, but more of a means of this is a threat and you're going to have to deal with this, and
It's a
you
different
can do it.
challenge that they're not used to, kind of deal.
Yeah, and if going back to Blades in the Dark, which now everything to me goes back to Blades in the Dark, is you're stuck in a city, and that's if you go outside the city, you're crossing through the ghost field, and horrible things will happen. So you're stuck in the city.
No, I gotcha. Okay.
It's like, okay, there's all these factions. Some are friendly, some are not, but
Right.
everything that happens is in the city.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think, and again, going back, I don't think that every game has to be to this level, but in another way too, it's like it's just so easy. It's just so easy to just not make a lot of threats. And like if you're playing Traveler, if there's too much of a threat on a planet, oh, let's get on our spaceship and leave. Okay.
Right.
Or I'm a ranger. I really don't care. I'll go out and forage. We'll just leave. I got the druid and the ranger and the cleric. We can all just make it on our own. We'll just leave, And there's so, and I think I think I think it takes away a lot of that stress, which I think could make for some very good stories and put pressures in ways that are interesting that you can't fix with a sword.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like in using Dune as an example too. I mean, if you're on Arrakis, that's the Dune planet, right? Arrakis is his name. And you even if you can't really leave the city because that's where the water's at.
Yeah,
and
there might be some other towns and posts that you could go, but we'll say there's only a handful, maybe 10 or
but
20.
you got the Judicars everywhere, and coming after you then, and yeah, so because there's you got technology helping you with on that one. But again, the spaceship, you couldn't get in a spaceship and just leave because you need the spice guys to take you away. You just need to jump in the ship and go. So you're kind of like once you're on that planet, you're stuck without these resources and that. Yeah. So,
you think about too, it's like, watching some of these movies like what's that one with Chris Helmsworth where he ends up was on a rescue mission for this kid, and he's in where was he? Where did he get dropped in? It was like
not sure.
Well, anyway, he's there's a group of people and they go rescue this kid. Things go south, and he's trying to get out of this country with this kid.
Okay.
There it's not necessarily everything's hostile, but that whole environment's foreign. As far as not foreign that way, but foreign to him, and having to deal with the situation he's in. There's no leaving it. He has to deal with whatever it is that's in that city.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think those are great adventures too, doing them that way. Especially if you plop somebody down in a region where they can't even understand just the basics of communication.
Yeah.
And then you can't even ask for things. you're just this weird stranger guy with a kid running through their streets, and probably got a big weapon with him too on top of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, it would be weird, but yeah, I think that would be if you could probably do like a nice adventure out of that, a nice lengthy adventure, but I don't know if you could like stretch it out to an entire campaign.
No, and to be fair, I think it depends. I mean, if you were to do something more like, which I've never done, but like the City State of the Invincible Overlord, that one it would probably be a much different type of thing than you would do if it was just we're just going to play 5 or 6 sessions and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, I actually, one of the things that we did with the players one time, because Rob Conley and I kind of co-DM'd the City State of the Invincible Overlord, and we kind of took turns, and then we just would take over. But one of the ones we did is we actually would do theme campaigns. And one of the themes for one of the campaigns was have all the players become city guards. So we turned the tables on them.
Yeah.
And so, it was a short campaign, but it was really interesting because it allowed us to do this urban survival type of deal within an organization that was there to protect everybody else. But at the same time, they were also ran against those same people that they were protecting, and then there was other odd stuff going on, and it was just interesting to see like how they developed tactics for dealing with adventures that they knew they were overpowered. Because I mean, how many times have we had in a you run a campaign and the adventurers got stopped by city guards, and then basically in 5 minutes the adventurers were just counting the city guards' silver as they walked away.
Yeah.
There wasn't much to it. But this one helped them develop techniques and strategies against adventurers. And then the interesting thing that happened was the following campaigns, the adventurers all respected the city guard a whole hell of a lot more. Like if they asked them to do something, they did it. They just because we did that, it was kind of a interesting side effect from that in running that campaign.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, especially with D&D, because there is that power scale, it tends to make people, I think, with characters less, I guess, submissive to the authority as it would be in real life.
Yeah, and to be honest, we ran that campaign using GURPS, so GURPS is one of the games where it doesn't matter how many points you have. Some noob can hit you in Rocky World with a real lucky shot. So that does make a difference in the system you're using too.
So the next one that was listed is political intrigue. It says Arrakis is the source of the spice, and that makes it valuable beyond compare. It goes, there is never enough spice to satiate the needs of the Imperium, and so everyone is looking to get more than their fair share of it. Right. This is before you even consider the usual political maneuverings of any noble house looking to advance their holdings and power base. So, it is very obvious, I think, that reading Arrakis, there's political intrigue. That is the centermost thing that this revolves around.
Yeah, they got 3 houses. They got the Emperor, and then it's been so long since I've read them. I just remember.
There's the Harkonnens, there's Atreides, and then I can't remember.
Atreides, yeah, that's right, House Atreides. And the other one was the weird baron who floats around.
Yeah, the Harkonnen.
Harkonnen, yeah. And then over everybody was the emperors, kind of intrigue and whatnot. Was there another one too? I guess.
Oh, there was multiple houses. I don't know how many of them were in play in the first book. But
right. I think those were the 2 main ones.
Yes.
And then And it just goes to show you don't need a whole bunch of houses to really make it interesting.
No. And this kind of makes me think too, it's like, I think as a character, as a player in campaigns that I've been in, and even as GM, I've never cared about the politics in the setting.
Oh, really?
Because I don't think it ever mattered.
Oh, okay. I love throwing it in there. Yeah. I mean, it may not be because of, I don't know, like power standing within a political structure, but it can trickle down and influence certain things, even if it's political intrigue in, I would call it like a guild or something like that, trying to vie for it. Say you piss off a different guild, well, all of a sudden, all the metal workers or whatever, weaponsmiths, they're not going to sell any more weapons. Even though you're not doing it, you've somehow pissed them off.
Right.
And now, especially if you go up to like the one we were talking about, the urban survival, those two, I think, go hand in hand. I mean, I think if you're going to do an urban survival, you got to survive the politics, like you were saying, you have to learn the intricacies of whatever local politics are. And then you have to learn like the individual nuances of each one. I know in the one campaign that I was going through I was played a thief, and what I did is even though it wasn't an action-based kind of thing, I went around and spied on like some important people in certain political positions and found out what their weaknesses were and what their, who they relied on, who they trusted, and then I used it against them and tried to manipulate things so My power base got larger.
So let's go back to that. So this game you're playing, was it a sandbox or was it an actual like published adventure?
This is city. It's Rob Conley's version of the city state of the Invincible Overlord.
So basically, but you're playing a sandbox, right? Is that what was going on?
Yeah, it's definitely a sandbox. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, but just go. Let's just go to like published modules.
Well, that's tougher.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more difficult.
Do you ever have been in one that you actually cared? Like
when
as
I'm
far
doing
as
published modules?
Yeah, published modules that you played in it and you're like, I really care about what's going on.
No, I mean when you're talking about published modules, it's just sort of episodal, so it really doesn't really matter. You're just kind of going through this adventure and
yeah, but it may be a lot of blah blah blah. They'll throw a lot of text and I'll read it, but I'm like, nobody cares that King such and such did this such and such, and
because there's no context to it, because it's nothing that the players have ever, been involved with, and all of a sudden you're doing this big information dump on them, and by then they're getting Cheetos and getting the pop.
Yeah.
It's like, when do we roll for initiative? Let's go.
Well, I think the other thing is that the information is given, in an expositionary format, which is a large chunk of text just being downloaded. Where it sounds like with your sandbox, it was like, hey, what can I find out? Oh, I find some stuff. Ooh, what can I leverage?
Yep. It happens organically, and you just kind of work your way into it.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of games that are doing, I think, are much better at that. But it seems like for the longest time, I think politics and factions is not really been well implemented. And like even I haven't done a lot of Forgotten Realms, the little bit of the stuff that they got going there, I don't.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, because I think we got the Lost Mines of Found where they throw a little bit in there, but I'm like, there's nothing that gave me context of what to even do with this.
Right.
Okay, you're this, you're the fist of this, or you're the this of this, or you're the like. So what? Oh, this person such. It's like, so what? I guess maybe I need to go read a bunch of books and figure it out, but there's nothing that's given direction as far as how to handle that or how it even really matters. But I think with the sandbox, I think that's where it works. And I think that with the type of games we're looking at, probably where the politics go is where characters are in a location that's somewhat stationary. They're not wandering from place to place to place. You have some central location that you're operating out of.
Right. Well, and then, just for an example from the game that I run for Comor Forest, there's always I should say there's a political stuff going on, but it's sort of always in the background, because there's definitely to give context for this, is like Hound's Head is its own independent thing. It was created by this guy who got special permission from the king to establish this, to start civilizing this northern region known as the Comor Forest. Well, the Baron to the south, Baron Mabray, doesn't like that because he knows how many resources are up there, but all his attempts always failed. And this guy was able to accomplish what he did. So there's always this rivalry from this well-established noble down to the south who rules this town of Scorn, that's not that far away from Hound's Head, that's always trying to influence who goes up to Hound's Head. They're sending spies up there, what's going on. He sends his guard, how back in the 80s where like the MiGs and the US fighters would fly past, they wouldn't fire on each other, but they would kind of get real close and dip into the boundaries that they weren't supposed to go in. Well, he sends up his guards and just kind of dips into the territory just so there's always that play, whether the players react on it or get involved with it, it's still happening and it's still there. It plays in the background, and eventually, while it might not have any effect on the game in the beginning, it may down the line, and it may directly or indirectly, but I think it adds a nice depth when you do add the political intrigue to any type of game. It's just fun.
I agree, and I think it gives something that actually can hook the characters into the setting, like that they want to hook into.
Yeah.
So there's been there's a game called Smallville, and it does characters do relationship maps.
Is that like from the TV show, or is that a
Yeah. So
okay?
the TV show, I've not really watched it, but the idea is
Mhm.
it's who's doing what with whom and who likes who,
Okay, so
and
it's like Sims.
yeah. But what's kind of interesting is you can, but the idea is for that game is everybody sits down and there's people, locations, and there's events, and you start working it out. And I think one way is to it seems like a lot of times where if you're involved in the politics, it's like, oh, the Duke hires you to do this. But, you know, it would be much more interesting, I think, a lot of times to get people to hook in quicker is to tie you in very much in with the politics from the beginning.
Mhm.
Like maybe right now you are the son of such and such, and your dad's body lays dead, and his assassins are there.
Right.
Whatever it may be, and then you find out there's a house that's after you. Whatever it may be, I think there's an
Mhm.
opportunity to tie people in personally into that network of webs.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
even if you don't have to make it that dramatic, but at least say, you know what, your uncle's in the moneylenders guild,
Mhm.
and say, okay, I think so. I think there's opportunities that I think sometimes miss, especially I think adventure writers. I think for us running our own games, it's easier to implement that stuff, especially. But I don't know that there's much that's. I don't know that much of the stuff is actually found in published material, and I don't think much of the stuff is actually integrated into the writing of games to kind of instruct people.
Yeah, and I don't know how much you'd want to write that into adventure anyways, because I think my job as a GM is if I'm going to run an adventure written by you, I'm going to read it and then personalize it to my campaign.
Right.
I'm not going to use probably any of your political stuff unless there's bits and pieces. I might take it and like, oh, I like that, but I'll kind of make it my own. And because if you're just going to run an adventure on its own and it's just going to be episodal, then yeah, you're not going to get too much involved in that. It's not going to happen
Well, I
too
think it
much.
depends whether your situation may be is I want to take something and plug it right in my world versus
Hmm.
taking something and running it as it is.
Right. Yeah, and I'm more of a campaign person than I am a
Right. But the adventure could
mm,
still have like here's 10 hooks
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
or
Yeah,
10
they should have
relationships
something.
that may
Hmm.
work out. So if you do these are good relationships, and also have like even going with Blades in the Dark, your crew starts out with a good relationship and a bad relationship.
Okay.
So one faction you're in good shape with, another faction you're in bad shape with, and another faction you're in their territory and you have to pay them money.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah,
okay,
I
that
mean,
that
I think that's helpful because I think there you have defined things right there. One
yeah
you like, one you don't. And I think you have to keep it that simple if you're going to do that. You just keep it really basic and don't try to, like you were talking about before, trying to do all this exposition dump in the beginning because nobody hears it afterward. Because I remember those old TSR modules, they use a 4 font and it's like 3 pages of that, there's like 10,000 words in 3 pages, and it's all box text that you got
yeah
to read to the players before you even start the adventure. And
they're
yeah,
still doing it. I was
I
playing
know.
the Descent of Avernus, and they're still just dumping stuff, and I'm
Yeah,
like
I know, I
it's
know.
like
But the thing about those adventures is while I would never run them as is because they're just too bloated. They could all those adventures could probably be refined down into like a dozen or maybe a half two dozen pages maybe. And I think you were talking about like a plot line or something
yeah
like that, and you could probably run the adventure much easier and much better using a plot line than you could just reading the entire book,
yeah
kind of deal. And I think that's the way you run like pre-made adventure canned adventures. The simpler the better it is for some folks, because you can really every time I write my micro adventures, and then when I run them for folks, it's funny how much I can milk out of a micro adventure. Even I think it's going to be a 2-hour adventure, how much gets added to it with me, just because I never run my own adventures the way I wrote them, because I kind of adapted to the situation that the player's in, or who's at the table, and how much you can get out of a small adventure, and that could last for different sessions and whatnot. So the
Yeah.
easier the better, I think.
And I think, right. So it comes, there's two aspects. So you have the GM aspect, you also have the player aspect. So the GM aspect, you also have, you've got your already established role, but you've also have the politics already kind of defined.
Yeah.
And then you have maybe people that maybe are just wanting to run it as is. And also sometimes you have players that want to push those, that are interested in those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what you just got to read the table and see, hope, and run with whatever crew you got. Hopefully they're somewhat aligned, but if you got like half of them that are just adventure hounds and want to just murder hobo stuff, and then you've got your other half who are into the nuances and then the intricacies of your world, and want to, find out like the color of the queen's dress or whatever. It's something that you just, as a GM, you got to kind of find your rhythm. And with those canned adventures, it's kind of the same way. How much of that detail are you going to take with you for the adventure?
Yeah, and I kind of circle around. I still think that, in general, that's where published adventures fail. And I think that if you want to add spice to your game, or anybody's game, it's just like, I think adding political intrigue in a way that's organic, in a way that actually just matters to the characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that right there, that last sentence, like, it matters to the characters. Yeah, that makes such a huge difference.
And you could even say, hey, the such and such is just murdered. The prince's son has been murdered. Why do you care?
Right.
Let them come up with why they care.
Yeah.
I care because I served under him during the wars of Pelennor, and I fought by his side, and whatever. At least you're creating a hook for characters, for the setting, and for the politics, and it does definitely, I think, adds a whole lot more color to a game that, if you let it, all it's going to turn into is just a point crawl and hacking and slashing and getting gold. Yeah. And that's what you want to play. That's fine. But I mean, if you're looking for more, a little political intrigue can actually go a long ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
So the next one is Canley, the Assassination and Vendetta. So what are your thoughts on assassinations and vendettas?
They're interesting. I mean, I don't know. I can't see if I've ever, I'm trying to think. I don't know if I've ever used like an assassination plot point.
Never have. I never have.
Vendettas, yeah. I mean, I've definitely used that where player has slighted somebody, and then they're coming after them in different ways or whatever. But assassination, I think that's a little bit too. It's an interesting, I guess, like you're saying, like a plot hook towards something. But to use an assassination attempt on a player, I think I would just use it more as a dramatic effect than actual.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever. No, that would be right. You could either have a failed assassination attempt.
Well, I take that back, because it was actually last campaign. One of the characters almost got assassinated by an alewife. And the reason why what happened is these guys, and again, we're within context, they had no idea. They went to this farmstead, and I don't know what happened. They were a pretty reasonable group, and I guess they had like a bad supper that night, but they went and murder hoboed like this family. I mean, just out of the, I mean, they were unarmed, and I just remember the family just wasn't taking any of their adventure chest thumping. They're like, no, screw you, we're not doing that. And they killed him. Well, this lady was related to that family. So when she found out that they came to her village, she poisoned their ale. She tried to kill them off. So so I guess I did use that at one point. Yeah. So.
I think that the idea with assassination and vendettas, especially assassination, is if you think about assassinations in real life,
right?
Especially with political figures, or even not assassination, but let's say let's just say, for instance, just not to go political or recent, but with the storming of the Capitol, what if
Right.
they, captured members of Congress and things? I mean, our country would have just like it would have flipped the tables. I mean, I think assassinations in a game can be done to narratively flip the table. Like, okay, this is who knows what's going to happen, but the status quo is broken, and
Yeah.
it's martial law, or it could be you're with a certain group and now you're going to be vilified,
Right.
or
Yeah.
could be the city where all of a sudden, hey, maybe you're a group of outsiders, but an outsider killed a certain person, and now you're seen as a threat. Now they're looking for you because you just
Yeah.
happen to look like them, or
Yeah.
whatever it may
Guilty by
be.
location. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think if you use an assassination as a plot point for like something like that, I think it's one of those ones that you would definitely want to build up to. I don't think you'd want to do it right away, because again, I'm all about having the event happen in some sort of context that the players are involved in. So if the players are maybe in this town and they're invested in it, and say an important person gets assassinated, all of a sudden those players are going to be more invested in. And the other thing that could be make it more interesting is using your thing. Well, they're outsiders, so now people are looking at them. Hey, wait a minute, even though they may have been friends with this guy, you're still the strangers in town. He was fine until you got here. Kind of thing. So, but yet they're trying to find out who really assassinated him. I mean, start turning into a Hitchcock film at that point. But I mean, I that's not a bad thing either.
Yeah. So there's the I mentioned before in another podcast, but there's a adventure or a mystery game called Brindlewood Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is that you go in, there's a mystery, there's clues and there's suspects, but there's a crime that's happened and there's a mystery that's happening, but it's not been predetermined. And but one of the things the GM can do along the way is you just kill an NPC.
Right.
And it just freaks people out. I mean, its only purpose is to create a unbalancing of to the players.
Right.
They don't see that coming. All of a sudden, this person's dead in your room, and the throat's been cut. Like, what? It's like,
yeah.
And maybe you don't even know why it happened. You just throw that in there.
Right.
Like, I don't know why they did. I'm going to figure it out as we play because I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun trying to figure that out. Yeah.
So I think there are different opportunities, and vendettas is another thing. I think going back to so what they have in Blades in the Dark is, and also with some things, is called you have what's called rivals, friends and rivals.
Sure.
But if you think about having a group of people that you cannot deal with them in a physically direct way,
mm-hmm.
but they're still a thorn in your side.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think that's another way of doing this. And maybe, it's not a vendetta, but with Blades in the Dark, the thorn in your side could actually just be a family member that just causing you problems. Maybe they're always needing money or they're always in trouble. But the idea is vendettas here is, I think the idea is that, you could have another group or another person that is working directly opposing you or the
mm-hmm.
characters. And the players and the characters must deal with it, but they can't do it through direct violence.
Yeah. No, that's the fun one. Like, again, I'll use the example of Joe's campaign I'm running with, or that I'm running him through. Part of his thing is being a tinker. He collects scrap. He goes through town and he has these different locations and he picks up scrap, and we kind of have this little mini game with his scrap on what he gets and what he can make with it and different things. But there's this a gang out there, but I'm using the term gang loosely. It's just like a bunch of guys who they're called the vultures, who scavenge stuff too. So they're kind of scrappers too. So he's always in competition with them, trying to get to spots.
Yeah.
And a lot of times he doesn't, sometimes he doesn't get to the good spots before they do, because he has a full-time job, and some of these scrappers are full-time scrappers so they can be there longer. So it kind of pisses him off, but he can't, you can't just like go murder hobo in the middle of town because in Scorn, you'll go to jail. There's a court system, he's in the guild. So he has a lawyer and the whole bit and everything, but but he's also not in any physical position to take these guys on because they're kind of bigger. But they've never made any threat to him, but they always get there before he does. So it's kind of
they're not a physical threat, but they are like an economic threat.
Right. Yeah. And it makes it a fun. I love those kind of things where it's just not like, two groups thumping chests at one another. There's just this goofy little thing that you would never think about, that they get pissed off at each other.
You see that in movies, right? Because I hate the way it ended, but like in Twister, they had the people doing it for profit and the people doing it for because they're nice people,
right?
And they're competing the whole time, and or even Indiana Jones or something where you may have a rival archaeologist.
Right. Yeah.
You're not going to shoot him. There's no reason that you have to shoot this guy, but yet he's complicating your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think those are the best, vendettas in a way. It's just, adding that extra complication in the character's life that they have to deal with. And hopefully, they become fun and interesting and everything. And then because I know Joe spent like a whole night one night, he was texting me all the stuff that he was going to do to this guy who keeps taking his scrap. So yeah, it was just
as a GM, you won. That the moment that they are thinking about the game outside of the hours that you're playing.
Yeah.
To me, that's to me the best feeling. People are talking about later.
It's a lot of fun. In a campaign where I ran with, this was an interesting one because you've got the party and they were I think they were first or second level. They were very low level, and they encountered this warg with these giant pack of wolves. And this warg, and the warg just basically made him bow down to him and just really humiliated them because the warg knew, I could wipe out all you guys, and they knew it too, and they did not, so and for the entire rest of the campaign, all they did was talk about going back and killing that warg. They just wanted, because they just hated what happened to them. But the funny thing is, when they had their chance, they didn't do it. They never went back and killed them, and that because there was too many other important things going on at the time to deal with that. It was like their opportunity to kill them had passed, and now what they were doing now was more important than just killing a warg. So it was an interesting transition because that was like their number one hated enemy for the longest time.
Yeah, I find ethics. If you try and look at what triggers a group to resort to killing a creature or a person, like the logic, it's sometimes astounding and confusing. Now you're wanting to kill him because of this, but before you weren't because that was okay. It's like right. I don't understand your moral compass.
Right. Yeah. Who gets your mercy today and who gets the sword?
Yeah. It's like they did all these terrible things. That's okay. Well, they just lied to me. Well, they got to die. It's like, well, wait a minute. It's like,
oh yeah. Gosh.
Wait.
Well, they got so mad at my healing potions guy in there too, because I have this guy named Hugo's Healing Potions, and he sells potions, and everybody knows that they're not always good. It's one of those things. So they're really cheap, though. You can buy a bunch of them, but there's a 1 in 6 chance that they may not work.
Yeah.
So I can't remember which one. They had 2 or 3 go bad on them, and so then they were just like, "I'm gonna go back and kick Hugo's butt. I'm gonna kill him." It's just funny how what random things will get them into murder hobo rage.
It says right on the package, there's no implied warranty.
Right? Yeah. Basically, no guarantees and no returns. Mm-hmm.
So the second to last is mysticism.
I love that one.
I think I think that this is, to me, the number one failing of most RPGs, fantasy RPGs, in that magic is just really is another form of dealing damage or doing
I
some sort of
agree.
effect.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, I guess when I think of mysticism, I think more of like the religious aspects of
Yeah,
it, though, too.
right. Because
But again, you're falling into like if we're talking about D&D and a lot of the stuff uses it. I mean, we kind of use that Vancian magic system, and it's just a very unimaginative and an uninspiring system. It's just a list of spells that do this or do that, and there's no.
yeah, it's made for
It's
a
I
war
don't.
game.
Yeah, it's. I've never liked it. I mean, I work with what it is, but I have more fun with the clerical magic in my games. Instead of just doing give cleric spells, what I kind of do is, how they have that turn ability
Yeah,
type thing. I call it a divine act. So depending on what level you are, you can do a divine act. So if you're a second level, you can do 2 or 3 or something. That's the only thing I kind of quantify. But the divine act is not quantifiable. I don't tell you what you can do and what can't do. But the only thing that sort of dictates the parameters is the god that you're worshiping. If you've got a war god and you're trying to heal somebody or something like that, no, it's not going to happen. But if you want your divine act as you stab this troll, your tip of your spear is going to catch on fire. You can do that. You still have to do the rolls and everything just to make sure you're still in divine favor. Use some sort of mechanic through it.
right.
But it relies more on the belief system, the aspect of the god, and the imagination of the player.
Right. No, I think it's a much more interesting, better way of handling it, because it seems like, because mysticism, I don't know. I didn't look up the etymology, but I'm sure that it's also tied with mystery,
Right. Yeah.
and the mysteries, and there's probably kind of dealing with the cults and whatnot. But I think clerics have they're just still magic users in generally the way they're written, and especially in the way that they're played.
Yeah.
Because I don't know anybody plays it where what does it mean to be a cleric of such and such, or a cleric of whatever.
Right.
And also there never seems to be any sort of hierarchy that you're subject to.
Oh, like when you're a cleric, you don't have like someone you answer to.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing? Just walking around doing stuff. Like, it's like,
And again, it's something that's not written anywhere, but it's something I do myself as a player. Because I think a lot of these RPGs, you've got to do a lot of work for yourself if you really want to make it work. I mean, there's never going to be a perfect system, or because there's always going to be flaws even in what stuff you do. All you can do is try to make it the best fit for your game that you can do. And the thing is, you have to have the players buy into that too, or they're going to, well, I want my cure light spell at first level. And if they want to do that, okay, I'm not going to fight them on it, but it's like, well, let's try out this way.
But it makes it much less interesting. It can,
it does.
It can be, maybe that's what they want. But I mean, and this is not necessarily true for every table, but I think, the idea is that magic can be, it's so common, and it's so it loses its mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a shame. That's a crying shame when your magic loses its mystery, because that's just it just becomes a industrialized product at that point.
Yeah.
You just have it I can crank out this much this day, and that's all I can do. Well, next day I can do it again, and it just becomes sort of an assembly line.
Yeah, and I don't know there's been much in the way. I mean, as players they can, but I mean, I don't know if there's really been much in the way of, if you are a cleric of a certain deity and that deity exists, what are the requirements to be in that faith?
Right.
And there should be something.
Yeah. I mean, that's something, I try to develop in my game too.
Yeah.
If you're a god of war, you can't or because I have a healing goddess in there, and if you're going around and like kicking the shit out of people, that's not going to jive with your the aspect of your goddess. You're going to start, those divine acts are not going to work anymore because you're not acting within her structure, her belief system. But again, it's one of those things where I think one of the things that's helpful in that aspect, as you're talking about, is when you have your pantheon or whatever you're going to use in a game, is you have at least like 3 to 5 tenets or pillars, if you want to call them, of your faith, and just have them in simple sentences. Like Christians got their 10 commandments.
Right.
The Islam has their pillars of, I think it's 5 pillars and whatnot. And then, so you have those things that hold up those beliefs that hold up your beliefs in that God's structure. And if you do that for each one of your gods, like I said, 3 to 5 sentences of these beliefs, and if you start failing on them, then that you're going to start losing stuff or be warned, or you're depending on if you have a very temperamental god who it might just cut you off right, no, you're done. I'm not dealing with you. Hopefully that comes out in role playing, and it adds to interesting role playing opportunities. And
yeah, I think what happens is I'm terrible about, I never, as far as the deities, and whenever I don't really run deity a lot, but I even want to have, I've not done a whole lot of, maybe I made people pick, but I've never, I don't know, anybody really cared,
Sure.
Everybody just, well, I'll just pick whoever. And I have not been necessarily good at enforcing that. But I think what happens is most people pick clerics because they just want to be the person that does the assisting, the aiding.
Right. Yeah.
And be able to do combat.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think for if you're going to run an ongoing campaign, it just, I don't know, it gets boring, because it just never made sense to me if you're a war god cleric or a healing cleric, you're still picking from the same spells.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is, we also come to, I think because of where we're at, we kind of view religion as in a monotheistic way.
Mm-hmm.
But most of those people in that day, they believed in many gods, and it wasn't just they'd pay service to such and such, and maybe during certain types of things they would give offerings to this, or they'd celebrate certain offerings for another god. I mean, there was no sort of, and I think they would appeal to a particular god for a particular reason, but that wasn't considered a problem. And even with like the Romans, they would bring other gods from the conquered lands and then bring them in, and they became just part of this whole happy family. You still had to still pay tribute to Caesar and acknowledge him, but there was no, they weren't judging as far as these are not true gods. So there was no problem if you worshipped other gods,
right?
Because even with the Christians, the problem wasn't that they believed in one God. The problem was they wouldn't give obeisance to Caesar or acknowledge other gods, and therefore they consider them, I think, to be what's I'm looking for. They didn't have the loyalty. There was that's what loyalty if you couldn't demand fealty.
Right.
So I think and I don't know how you would do this, but maybe there could be a mechanical thing, like you go into town and do you give alms to the temple or not give alms to the temple? And if you do, I'll roll 1d6. If you get a 6, maybe you get a reroll sometime during the game. There may be ways you could do it, but maybe then that becomes too mechanical. I don't know.
Well, like Pendragon has the dot system. I don't know if have you ever seen the Pendot character?
No, I'd like to play it someday, but I've never.
Yeah, me too. I've never played Pendragon, but I have a lot of the books because I just love them. But they have I don't remember what it's called, but like a trait tracker or something like that. You've got pious and unpious. And so if you do something, you get a dot on that. So you're further along the pious track. But if you don't do something, you start losing dots, or you start going into the unpious category. I guess you could do a simple mechanic like that if
Oh,
you,
yeah, because you wouldn't even need to be a cleric for that.
yeah, you wouldn't need to be a cleric or anything. Yeah, you could do it for everybody actually. Yeah.
So you could, as you gain in piety,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, going back to like, but maybe that piety would gain you benefit with a particular religion through a
Absolutely.
church.
Yeah. If you walk into church and
So,
you're kind of known for your acts of kindness or whatever, you gain a benefit, or maybe, I mean, it could be just as simple as they'll allow you to stay and have a meal.
yeah.
Just something very simple as that. But yeah, I mean, I could see that being you're adding another aspect to like a character sheet in a way.
Yeah,
Which,
but you're also you're throwing in pot hooks. You say, you know what, I want to increase my piety.
right? Yeah, absolutely. I love stuff like that. So I'm into the small details and doing that. And I didn't think about that till now, because I'm like, yeah, that's not actually a bad idea in a way.
Well, because if you think about, there's another game I'm thinking about. It's I think it's Forbidden Lands, where you, and a lot of these will do this, is you can grow in your prestige.
Okay.
But think about it, it's like you could have political prestige, you could have a prestige of a faith,
Right.
and
Yeah, it's
maybe,
almost like the reputation.
oh yeah, that's what it was. It wasn't prestige, it's reputation.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you just have a generic reputation, I don't think that works.
No, but you could have
you have to be very specific.
Yeah. And so you could even have maybe things that would be antithetical, maybe a reputation with a negative side too. So.
Well, yeah, because if you have a high reputation with this one group and this group doesn't like you or doesn't like that group, then automatically you're going to have a negative reaction in that other group.
Yeah, I think no, I think that was the best way of doing it, because that way it'd be voluntary. You wouldn't necessarily have to make it strictly mechanic. You could just kind of do it on the fly.
What's that?
Like for instance, like let's say your prestige goes from, let's say, 1 to 5 or 1 to 6.
Okay.
And let's say, just make up this rule as I go.
Yeah, sure.
And let's say you want to make an appeal, and maybe roll a 6-sider.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it comes up, that number or less, then you succeeded. And depending on your level of prestige, that's the type of thing you could ask for. So maybe a first level of, or not prestige, but of reputation, maybe first level of pious reputation, you roll it. They will give you some provisions.
Yeah.
A second level, maybe they will actually let you into the keep, and they will also, maybe heal the party or whatever it may be. And maybe you don't have to predetermine it ahead of time, but you can kind of in your mind saying, you know what, as your reputation grows, and if they know of you, then you will be rewarded accordingly.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic way of doing it. It's simple and easy to do, and gives the players a chance to succeed and also to fail. I always like that part.
And then you could also tie it with we can go back to the political factions too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So if you're helping out the prince, you get for the house of Gryffindor or whatever
whichever house it is. Yeah, absolutely.
And then and I suppose you could lose reputation. I think as you would gain in that, then that would be incentive for characters to, even during an adventure, to find ways. And I think even going back to like historical, like with the Roman Catholics, I mean, they would go on, different missions to get this or that, or you could tie that sort of thing in as well, like you maybe get a vision quest, to go do something.
Yeah, find the bones of Saint Philip and bring them back to the Queen or something like that.
Oh yeah, and also maybe if you really mess up, you could do stuff like, do you ever see The Mission? With
oh yeah,
you're dragging your armor. You're a cleric. You've messed up. All that plate mail you're wearing while you're dragging it. Now you got to carry it with you up and down.
Yep.
And then to get it restored back up or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I don't know.
You just have to have the players that just think that's cool too. That's the only thing. I come up with all these great ideas, but you still got to have the players that agree to. And I have to say, like the group that I have, they'll give me shit about everything, but they'll do it. They like doing it, and they'll kind of like, they have to give me grief, or I don't think they're involved. So
Like,
yeah.
they're not
But
paying
in
attention.
general, I've got a group that'll kind of try out some of my stuff, because sometimes I say, hey guys, I want to try this out. Let me know what you think. Make suggestions what you have, and if it's not working out, we'll get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's having trust.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and I think also players are willing to push the characters and also have trust. I think you're in a great spot when you have those two things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because I'm kind of a similar situation where so a lot of my players are not afraid to, they won't necessarily do stupid things, but they're not afraid to just push things in weird directions.
Yeah.
And to see how it comes out.
Yeah, that's cool. It's fun. It's good when they do that. I mean, I know I like it when my players do that. I'd much rather them, because I like to be as surprised as they are when I'm doing stuff. Sometimes they'll do stuff, and I'm like, oh, I never thought of it that way. That's really cool.
Yeah, and the thing is, I've kind of learned too that if their idea is interesting, there's always a chance it'll work. And if it's just crazy and interesting, I mean, I really want to see it, but we'll put it on the line and say, okay, you roll this, everything goes south. Your soul gets sucked out of your body and you get put in an automation. Right. If you win, we win this battle, you take her out, then you get the amulet. Okay.
Yeah.
You're gonna roll right now, but we know right now that there's a 6 and 8 chance that you're gonna fail and you're gonna have your soul sucked. But they're like, okay, let's do it. Okay.
I still say, while successes are fun, failures are a blast.
Well, especially when it's really tight and it's on the edge and somebody's throwing the dice and everybody's looking.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. That's so much fun when they're just like all tense and I was watching this one video, and I thought it was really fun because they rolled the normal dice, when they're doing this, but when it comes to a tense moment like that, they have one of those pillow D20s, and then they have to roll that one. So it's like a big dramatic effect, and I just love that. Yeah, so it's like rolling on the floor, and they're like watching the scene. It was so much fun. Yeah, I thought that was a good dramatic effect for the game.
Well, the last one is The Unknown. Dune is a place of mysteries. I think so desert holds secrets from the culture of the Fremen to the origin of spice. I think that's probably one aspect that I think that is probably not a problem in most games. Or do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with this one is the pacing of the unknown and the reveals and that is because it seems like especially in canned adventures, I guess, but I guess they do have to do the reveal and by the end, but it's sometimes you want it to last a little while just to you get hints at it.
I think what you're saying is you need to establish a mystery.
Yeah, you have to establish it first. So when you make the reveal, it's significant.
It may be more of a mystery than, hey, there's this tomb. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's like you kind of want to maybe have like what's behind this or what's behind that or how do we find the secret? Or I think it's kind of hard. I think sometimes we don't want that, but I think the idea of adding mysteries, I think it might be kind of hard. I don't know. The players would care about.
Well, again, it's taking that time, and I keep saying this word 100 times, but having that context with the mystery, and has somebody hinted at it beforehand, and what I like to do, especially for the unknown stuff, is trickle in maybe bits of information while they're actually focused on something else. So the adventurers find a hole in the ground because adventurers loves holes in the ground, and they're going to go in. But while they're at the bar finding out information, they might hear some fishermen talk about man, the waves were really rough, more normal than lately, da, 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 da. The next time they go in there, it's like, oh yeah, Jimmy never came back from his fishing thing. And then by the fourth session, you got Cthulhu coming out and eating everybody or something like that. Just
right,
some
you should have
subtle
left town. You had all the warnings. Why didn't you leave town?
right, yeah, just some subtle things to just have it like lay it out there. So then when it becomes more, Babylon 5, I thought did a great job when they revealed the shadow. And during that season, they kind of hinted at it, and then they had the reveal. And personally, I thought it was a fun reveal, and I thought they did a great job with it because they hinted at it throughout the time, and then they did the reveal, and it was like, oh, that's cool, and I'm rewatching Babylon 5, so that's what's on my.
Yeah, I've never watched it, so
yeah.
For
So
some
basically,
reason,
it was this alien race that people had heard about, but no one's ever or hasn't encountered except the one race they talked about. And then they found out that the humans were digging up this site. They didn't know what it was. Well, then it ended up being one of these shadow ships, and you just get glimpses of it. But it's just a really cool reveal. So this chaos force in the universe now has been unleashed. And
those in the form of an egg, and out pops Jonathan Winters.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
What have we done? We have
at least done. Yes.
Can we put them back in the egg?
But yeah, I mean, the mysteries is one of those things. I think it's a lot about pacing and doing those.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think also, kind of going back, it's like, it's kind of interesting to hear, like when you do a mystery, an actual mystery game. I mean, it's interesting to see how people speculate and the fun that they have. But going back to what I said before, you could just throw in some crazy things and and say, on occasion this happens, and then and then maybe partway through figure out, try and do, I guess, well, they did do well with Lost or Battlestar Galactica, but maybe tie it in at the end somehow,
Right. Well, yeah, like have you ever played in the Gumshoe system?
Yeah.
No much. Okay. So the philosophy I like about the Gumshoe system is it's not that you find the clues, because you do find the clues.
Right.
It's just how you interpret them. And I think that's such a fantastic philosophy, because you never run into that bottleneck of someone not finding a clue, and then the mystery just sort of comes to a halt, and you're just sort of like, okay, they didn't find this. that I can't tell you how many times it's happened at a convention game.
Well, yeah, because were they running a module?
Well, they were running a module, but they were also running, like, I think it was either third edition or a skill required thing. And they're so reliant on looking at the character sheets for stuff to happen that they just don't think sometimes it can just happen. Like the one guy made us all roll perception rolls for blood splattered all over the wall.
I was distracted. I thought it was jelly.
Yeah, like
I was looking at my watch. I was watching YouTube. What was your character doing? How can you miss that?
And it was funny because we all failed horribly, and he didn't know what to do.
Right.
He kind of got stuck because he relied too much on there. Where I think with the mechanic of, and having the philosophy of not relying on the character sheet for everything, but okay, you see the blood and you see the victim and maybe a couple other interesting clues, go, and you don't offer any solutions or any things. You just let the characters talk, and you're going to get way more better stuff than anything you ever planned out.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree, and I think the thing is that you don't have to go through elaborate things to hook the interest of players.
No, they get distracted, easily.
Oh no, what have I done?
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I mean, if you just put out some, because like mysteries, you don't have to make them complicated. In fact, I think it's a detriment if you make them complicated.
Yeah, and I think and maybe you don't even have to actually have a solution.
Absolutely. Yeah. There might be an answer that asks more questions.
Well, because
Mm.
thinking about it, it's like so watching the first three Star Wars movies, the episodes 4 through 6,
Okay.
it was a thing, right? It was kind of its thing. And then
Yeah.
when they came out 1 through 3,
Right.
it's like they had to answer every single thing, and it had the origin of every single thing, of every single person, and then it had to come in and lock in tight with episode 4. So it's like they wind up on the ship and the Oreganas and da 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 da. It's like I don't need to know all this. We didn't even need to put C3PO R2D2. You didn't have to make every single thing. And there could have been mysteries left that were never solved. That's like,
Right.
okay, I don't know.
Yeah, it was very forced. They were trying to, like you said, puzzle piece it right next to the other three movies. And I mean, there were so many things that series suffered from. But again, you're going and then it was a victim of its own success at the same time. You're never going to be able to duplicate those three movies. You're not. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever going, because when it's new, you had no expectations.
Well, I think right. I think that's part of it, and part of it too is the first. I mean, especially the first one, was definitely a very very pulp.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the feel is very light and very pulpy, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then it got a little darker, and then then episodes 1 through 3 became a political message, for right or for wrong, and then the last three, I don't know what they were.
It was content. Let's just face it. They were money makers and trying to keep the franchise.
That's the problem is because that first Star Wars. I mean, it was nobody had really high expectations. He kind of was doing all these crazy things. He had people who were. I think the best thing that happened with that first movie is that I think the director and George Lucas's wife at the time, they ended up rewriting that screenplay multiple times. So so the more George Lucas, I think, infused into this show, the worse it got.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. And then if you think about it, like you were the unknown and the mysteries, because we didn't know anything about the Star Wars stuff when we first watched it. There was no expectations. There was nothing there. We were kind of discovering it.
Right. Who's this guy in this armor with his breathing problem, the lightsaber? You're like, I don't know who he is, but man, that just is amazing.
Yeah, who is this guy? He looks so cool and everything. But then by the time the sequels came out, or the prequels came out, they were basically already trying to answer the questions they were trying to answer the questions we already knew the answer to.
Yeah.
And I get that for prequels, because sometimes it's fun to see how things got to where they got to. Unfortunately, like you said, it was too Lucasified. And the dialogue actually hurts to listen to most of the time. Physically hurt me to listen to.
So episode 2 I loved, but the way I would love to watch it is anytime anybody opens their mouth on a DVD, I would hit the skip to the next scene. and you watch it that way, it is fun. All the action scenes, the war scenes, the battles. But minute somebody opens their mouth, boop.
Just take it all the talking out. And it's a great movie. There you go. Yeah.
But going back to the I think that's where they also failed in the last three, is with Rey. She was an unknown person, but then they felt the need at the very last movie at that moment to tie her into an established character, Emperor Palpatine.
Oh, I never even saw the last movie yet. Was it the last? No, that was this.
I don't know.
The last, but I saw the first two, so they tied her. I was wondering if there was going to happen, because it seemed like it was a series of movies that wanted to tie everything up in a nice little bow.
Yeah. And that's where I think
I'm not into that. I agree.
Right. And so they couldn't leave things a mystery. They couldn't just leave she's just a person. She just is a person that just one day she's got the Force.
Right. Yeah, I mean, why can't it just be that? Why can't it just be her parent? Nobody knows who her parents are.
Yeah.
You
And,
know, you
and,
that you could do another trilogy about who they are later on.
and now I think it's really kind of I do think it is really kind of not very interesting, but like Tom Bombadil in The Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
It just shows up, right?
And I don't think he showed up in the Lord of the. Oh, you mean in the book
Yeah.
or in the films?
The
Yeah, the
book.
book. Don't they? Doesn't he? He was in The Hobbit, wasn't he? Not
No,
the Lord of the Rings.
no, I thought it was he?
Yeah, I think Bilbo found him, and what was
No,
his wife's name? Moon? I forgot.
no, I think it was the Lord of the
Goldberry.
Rings. I think it was the Lord of the
Was he?
Rings.
Okay. It's
Because
been a while
because
since I read that
he
too.
basically I think grabbed the ring, put it on himself, and then like no, not that big a deal.
Okay, for some reason I thought that was the Hobbit.
I could be wrong,
I'm not a Tolkien file, so I get like
but
Rob would know. He would tell you like what page he showed up
well,
on.
if he's listening, I'm
And
sure he's screaming at the podcast.
probably that's not
Probably
it, guys. You guys are
probably all
stupid.
three people that are ever going to listen to this podcast, except for my mother, will all be
Right?
yelling. But the
Yeah.
point is he just kind of shows up and does a thing and then leaves. Like I mean, that's another thing I suppose you could add to the mystery of
Hmm.
something just shows up, it affects the story, affects the plot, affects the characters, and then maybe it goes off screen and you don't know why or what or how.
Oh yeah, and I love doing that to the players because they just like what the hell. There was this one part in their most recent campaign where this giant tentacle creature just appeared on the roadway. Just boom. I mean, it was like big as a house and everything. And one of its tentacles was chopped up. It looks like it was pretty bloody. And they learned, what the heck? Where did this come from? I never told them anything, but what it was is in the previous campaign, one of my players hacked off a tentacle of this giant beast and he poured a gaseous form potion down its gullet into its bloodstream. I thought that's cool. So I made it turn into gaseous form. Well, I just had it extend on a little bit until I decided it would appear right there. While they will never know that, it was a fun little play on something that happened that the players will never, because there's no
Right.
reason why they would know that. But
Right. It does exist for a reason, but they just don't understand.
they just don't understand it. And it's one of those things too where I'm going to go back to JMS, the guy who wrote Babylon 5. People would ask him, how fast can you travel in hyperspace? And he goes, at the speed of plot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the way even though the
Right.
potion's supposed to get resolved within this many turns, that's not fun. I wanted it to linger on, and because I had this, and the funny thing is the players had passed this weird little cloud like 2 or 3 times and nothing happened. They just they avoided it. They're just like, what the hell is that? I said, you just see this gaseous thing floating in the air. And it's like, you're not really sure. It doesn't have a form. I said, it's just really big. So they would ride around and ride around. And on the 3rd time, it finally appeared. And they were just like, what? What is going on with that?
And I think that's a good point. I mean, as far as a GM, I mean, that's the part where I think as you get more experience, you realize, you're not beholden to the words as written. And I think especially if you have players who are that trust you, and then also they are more interested in things being fun than things being laid out
Right.
just as it is in the books.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's more fun for me too, just doing that stuff, because I hope a lot of times what I think is fun is also fun for them.
Right.
But because the nice thing about being a GM is you never really have to really work against the players. I mean, you shouldn't do it to begin with, because the players just get themselves into so much crap on their own. You don't have to do much to in that aspect. You just present situations and just and see how deep of a hole they dig, and just have fun with it, and have their hole dug because of decisions they made.
Yeah, you're right. You're just handing out rope. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Just how far do you want it? There you go. I got all the rope you want. That's why like Joe. Joe comes from a power gamer kind of background, and like his family and everything. So it was a change for him when he was playing in my game, because there was very few things I don't usually say no unless it just doesn't fit the setting or just out of the ordinary, or something weird. Can I have a car instead of horse? No, you can't have a car. But like if he asked me for certain things, I'd be like, yeah, let's work with that. We can do that. And he was so surprised how much allowance or things. And I'm like, well, if it's a good idea, I'll work with it. I said, I've always got more monsters than you do have hit points.
Right.
So I'm willing to, it's not that really big a deal. And I always try to have the players, while like a old school Essentials or any of the old school kind of systems they're more like cookie cutter classes, pretty much every fighter is like every other fighter, like every other, and clerics are pretty much the same across the board. Magic. I try to add something in there that'll be a little bit more interesting and unique to their character. So they're not just, a fighter with a sword and a shield. They're not just a magic user with a sleep spell, or they're not a cleric with just, an OSE, no spells.
Oh, really?
First level, no spells. Yeah. So, you have to. And
Axe may be that way too. I can't remember.
Well, yeah, because Axe is based off of
BX.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
If I remember, I don't know it that well. I have the book, but I've never played it. I actually bought it for the economic systems that they use, which are probably the best economic systems I've ever read or seen for gameable material.
Yeah.
Not that I've read a lot, I should say.
I think it's
probably the only one.
So, but I'm kind of, I did some kind of, I've got an Axe game that I started,
Okay.
but I'm not running it. But somebody else is. So on Discord, I had this idea. It's kind of nuts, but anyway, it's been going. I kind of got overwhelmed with the Discord. Another person's running it, and they're going with the full economic.
They're doing the full-fledged one, huh?
Yeah, we and so yeah. But the thing is, for me, it's it's. The Alex Marcus, is that his name? Everything he does is balanced. So. There is nothing in the machinery that he puts together that is faulty.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I don't, all these percentages and this and that and this and that and so much per households and how much acres.
Right. Yeah,
there's a point where it's like, can I just roll a couple 6-siders, a couple 8-siders, and we'll count this? And that's what I really am looking for anymore is.
Yeah. And for his thing, I've read it. And then I'm not going to ever use it the way it is. Cause like you said, it's way too detailed for it to use in my game. And, I never want my game to come down. Like, hopefully it's never interesting because you roll and how much money you get for this or that or something like that. Hopefully it's beyond that, but at least I can ingest it and maybe use the philosophy of it or some part of it and then make it simple for me in my game and fit it for me.
It's really good.
It's complex.
And the guy that's running the game, so we were kind of I was running it, he co-GM'd it, and then he's just pretty much running it now. Now I'm playing.
You're playing.
It's in a play-by-post, so everything moves real slow.
Gotcha.
The guy's like, I can't believe how long we're playing and how little experience that we've got.
When you get into those details like that, it's.
So they've actually, everybody's done a lot of stuff, but anywho, so this kid's like a kid. He's probably 30. He's a medical student, gone in the military, family. He's this spare time. I don't know how he does it. He's actually running the numbers and doing the math on this stuff.
Right. Got the energy to do that. Why not go for it? Yeah.
My brain just doesn't handle. I just don't have that capability anymore.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't have I'd rather, rate up weird adventures or, plot lines or something like that for players to hang themselves with or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's where I think to me a more simplified mechanic, even if it's not as real, is even if it goes a little bit more
Right.
abstracty, is a little bit more helpful. But anyway, but yeah, that's I guess going back from clerics not having spells, but that's but that's I mean that's the way it should be. Maybe you got to prove yourself.
Yeah,
I mean, what am I going to give you a spell? What have you done, Mister?
Right. Yeah. Right. Don't be asking for nothing yet.
Like,
oh, you haven't done anything. You come talk to me after you've done something for me.
yeah.
And don't think I didn't notice you didn't tie the full 10% last time you were in the temple.
Yeah, it's like that's the other thing. It's like, why are they giving all their money?
Yeah.
Or why are they not a part of religion that says, you know what, I'm an aesthetic. I don't take money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those are things that I as a part of a GM, that's something you kind of have to bring to the players, because the players are definitely not going to bring that to you sometimes.
So James Hathaway, who does I think Monster Man podcast,
I think so. Yeah,
he did the one that the Pantheons zine. Did you get his?
Is that the Pantheons pamphlet?
Yeah,
I did get that one. Yep.
So I don't know what he's going to do with that, and it was like so incredibly cheap. I think I actually threw an extra couple $.
Yeah, it was like I
£3.
Yeah, it was something like that, because I know that by that time I had pretty much exhausted my zine money, and but I did go in for the PDF for that one. I'm just looking at it now just to see what it is. Whoops. Oh man, it's all the way down on my list. I had to push, see more pledges.
So I didn't really pay attention to how many I'm still not to the level of you guys, but I was shocked that like, oh, I didn't do that many. I clicked the button. Like, I didn't really do that many. The button. Like, oh my goodness.
I know. I did so many more this year than the previous year. So
yeah, we definitely need to talk about what we did.
Kickstarters,
And I think the reason I'm thinking it's important is most of these also are available, I think, for the people that are still interested, they can pick it as a PDF somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so it looks like his pamphlet of Pantheons is a workbook zine that helps you create your Pantheon for your fantasy RPGs.
So the thing is, I was just thinking about, clerics not having spells. Then we talked about, well, what, about aesthetic, or maybe you have to give all your money, whatever. I just started thinking, it's like, you could just, here's a list of things to be a cleric. Which one are you going to pick? It's going to cost you. And the player can pick it. And you could even if you wanted to work out with the Pantheons with the character, say, okay, we're going to do this workbook for your Pantheon, or for your particular deity that you are devoted to.
And I think those end up being the best ones, because then you're kind of developing it sort of organically that way through play.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think and then you're being surprised and probably exploring options you never thought you would do on your own when you're doing it that way. So yeah, I think for me, that's the best way to kind of develop things. Yeah, it looks like, it'll be an interesting Kickstarter. I am looking forward to that, because that was one of those little toolboxes that I got into that I really wanted to.
So I'm looking for this is self-serving, and some of the stuff is I'm just looking forward to me to be using to do other things. So it's like, oh, okay. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Who knows? We'll be using other people's zines to make zines, and maybe they'll be using our zines to make zines or other products. It's like there's a potential here for things just to keep like building around each other and create a rich ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean that's the beautiful thing about now that we're on to zines a little bit, but just having to because I know back in the day when I first started doing zines, like I live in an area where there's really nobody knew what the hell a zine was. Nobody, they thought maybe I got hit in the head and wasn't pronouncing words right or something like that. But trying to create those things, and then if you, it's like when I put out the Manor, I just thought, again, we were just kind of in my own little box. I didn't know how much response I was going to get, but then it was kind of interesting because then people started making zines and they were thanking me for inspiring them to do their own zine, and they use stuff, kind of. Then they would ask me questions, and it was kind of cool just having that, accessibility that zines I think allows people, because it's just such a small, accessible product, and most of the guys that we've seen on the zine group are all accessible,
Oh yeah.
from the high to the low and everything, and it's a very encouraging group, and I'm kind of half curious to see how many people put out their first zines this year, and how many of them did it because they got help from folks in our group and everything, because I know there was a lot of that going on there for a while. So it's been very cool to see, because I love when I always get those questions answered, and I ask them, are you a zine maker? And they're, no, not yet, but I'm hoping to learn something from the group, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely pretty well. Well, I think we're hitting the time-space continuum.
Sounds good.
I think we're not careful, we go past the patience of even the most eager of listeners. So
yes, yeah. Wake up! Time to get up again. Podcast is over. Yeah, you've nodded off again.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tim. We'll I'm not sure if how we're going to do this, if it's going to be weekly or bi-weekly, but we'll definitely.
Like a good GM, we'll just make it up as we go.
We'll make it up. Yes, exactly. I think we have. There's no problem with us. I think creating content. So
no, not at all. Thanks for having me on again, Jeff.
No problem. Take care, Tim.